Hey guys, Travis Gillespie here. Today we're going to convert customary units. Remember, customary units are those units that are used primarily by countries such as the US. So we're not dealing with metric units today. And in this first problem, we're asked to convert 9 yards to feet. So let's look at this. There are a few different ways that you can solve this problem. And the method I show you is not the only way to set it up, but I'll show you just one way to set it up. However, regardless of any of the methods you use, as long as you're getting the right answer, that's what's most important, that you understand the concept. So for our first step, what we want to do is find a unit conversion. So a single unit conversion. So what I'm really saying here is, well, how many feet are in 1 yard? Or how many yards are in 1 foot? You've got to ask yourself that, and if you're lucky enough to have a formula chart, it'll probably be right in front of you. If not, you might have to do some memorization, but it's common knowledge that there are 3 feet to 1 yard. So 3 feet is equal to 1 yard. Now, I'm just abbreviating feet and yards here, or I could rewrite this so that it's written the other way around. 1 yard is equal to 3 feet. Now, you don't have to do this every time, write it either way, but I'll let you know when you get on to moving to step 2, having it written both ways it can be helpful for some people. So we've got step 1, and now we want to move on to step 2 because we've already found our unit conversion. And step 2, what you want to do is create a blank proportion. So let's just set up a blank proportion. And basically, a blank proportion, all you're going to do is create a fraction bar, or you're going to set up a ratio in a second. But this stuff is equal to this stuff, and the proportion's blank. There's nothing written here. The next thing I'm going to do is plug the units, feet and yards, into my proportion, or both ratios. Now, this is where things can get tricky. So I always tell my students, when you set up the units in your proportions, well, you always write it as you read it, see it, or say it. So write it as you read it. And let's just go ahead and erase that I. So read it, see it, or say it. And what we can do from here is just create a little bracket. So we always write it as we read it, see it, or say it. Some people might even say as you hear it. Maybe someone else is telling you. But if we look at this problem, it's written as yards to feet. So I'm reading it as yards to feet. And that's how I want to set up my proportion. Yards will go on top on this side. Feet will go on bottom. Another way to think about it is what comes first. Yards come first, so I'm going to put it on top. Feet come second, so I'm going to put them on bottom. And then from there, if I do it to this side, I've got to do it to the other side. So we have yards on top, feet on the bottom again. Now, is this the only way you can set up your proportion, where the first set of units go on top and the second set of units always go on bottom? No, it's not. But I'm not going to show you all the other ways of doing it. As long as you're putting the correct information in the correct spots and your proportion set up correctly, you could reorder these units in different ways. But that's for another video. But now our next step, what we want to do is match the correct value with the correct unit. So I see 9 yards here, and I want to connect or match that 9 with the correct set of units below. And since it's 9 yards, I'm going to put 9 down on top in this ratio and put an unknown value, so a variable, for feet below. So let's just put, I don't know, let's just put a z down. Okay, from here I have the first ratio on the left-hand side set up. Let's move over to step 1 and look at how we set up our unit conversion. Well, I have in this first equation feet first and yards second, and in the second equation yards first and feet second. Well, since the proportion's set up with yards on top, or yards first and feet second, let's just use the values in the second equation. It will just help us set up our proportion a little bit quicker or easier. So I'm going to put a 1 on top because 1 belongs or matches with the yards, and 3 on bottom, so 3 feet. So what we have here is 9 is to z as 1 is to 3. We've got our proportions set up. The next thing I want to do is cross multiply, or take the cross products of z and 1. 3 and 9. And notice how I didn't use units there. I'm just pretending that they're not there. They're kind of hidden right now. So let's just do an arrow over and write it as 1 times z. It's equal to 9 times 3. Well, I can simplify this sum. I know that 1 times z is equal to 1z. Well, basically, it's just hiding that multiplication symbol there. So I'm just going to write 1z for a second is equal to, well, 9 times 3 is 27. Now from here, our next step or our overall goal here is to isolate the variable z. Let's get rid of any numbers that it's being multiplied by. But we have a interesting thing going on here. Z, our variable, is being multiplied by 1. So typically what we do to isolate the variable is divide by the value that's being multiplied by the variable on both sides of the equation. But I can see here, since 1 is multiplying into z, I've got to ask myself, will that even change the value of z? Well, let's just pretend that z is a number. I'm just going to put some numbers up here. And if we have 1 times fix that multiplication symbol. 1 times 2. Well, 1 times 2 is equal to 2. And what if z was a 3? Well, 1 times 3 would be equal to 3. And if z was 10, 1 times 10 is equal to 10. So what we're seeing here is that identity property of multiplication, which tells us when you multiply a number such as 2, 3, or 10 by the number 1, well, the number 1 doesn't change that other number. You still get that value. So the identity property of multiplication is taking place here. We have 2, 3, and 10 when we multiply by 1. We also have, well, 1 times z. Let's think about what would happen here. 1 times z will give us a value of, well, basically z. Let's go ahead and put a z down below here. So 1 times z is the same thing as just having the value z. And we already know that 9 times 3 is 27, so I'm just going to bring the 27 down. And I'm not 100% done because I need to plug my units back in. Well, we started with yards and we want to convert to feet. So what I'm going to do is plug feet in. And I can see that 9 yards is equivalent to 27 feet. Let's go ahead and box that up.